Good afternoon, people. I hope you're well. Welcome back to the show. Great to see you all. Happy New Year. I hope you all enjoyed yourselves and are now recovering from your hangovers. The festive period has kind of come to an end, which means it's a new year, which means the transfer window is open. I love talking about transfers, but at the same time, I get frustrated by it. But I do know that this guy absolutely loves talking about Arsenal transfers as well. Tom Canton, how you doing, mate? Happy New Year to you, bro.
Yeah, and to you and the listeners as well. Yeah, transfer. I suppose. I mean, when you do it every day, so you get used to talking about it. I suppose you got to learn to love it.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I feel like every time that I listen to you, it's like we're linked with so and so. Someone so's done this. Someone said that we might do this, but you
Yeah.
can't beat the Arsenal transfer, mate. I'll tell you what. If there was an investigation going out looking for the most unsolved mystery, you might as well put Arsenal fans on it because their Instagram stories today has been hilarious with Mudryk saying that he's in London because someone see a London cabbie key ring that
Yeah.
he's now got or some crazy stat. I don't know what it is. I'm of course making that up, but that just seems what it is. It's everything they can find to say that he's coming. But we're going to talk a bit about transfers in a minute, Tom, because obviously we need players. And the reason we need players is not because we're fighting for top four, mate, because it looks like we're in a title race. I think it's
Mm.
fair to say, whether you believe it's going to be sustainable, Tom, that we can now say that Arsenal are in a title race. I don't believe there's many that would suggest that we're not. Whether they believe it's sustainable is, of course, a different question. And I think a lot of people are saying that with one or two signings at least, Arsenal will have a great, great chance of getting very close to Manchester City this year, which is a City side, you know, let's be honest, that doesn't look as um, what's the word? Brutally
Impressive.
amazing, I suppose, as the
Yeah.
last couple of seasons.
Which
They
is
have got
weird
an
with
amazing.
Holland up top. Like
I was just going to say they've got an amazing centre
Yeah.
forward, but it looks as if there's some weaknesses elsewhere to the side. I'm a bit surprised that Guardiola didn't go with Cancelo and Walker. I believe they were both fit, but he decided to take changes to Nathan Ake and, of course, Rico Lewis, along with the centre halves.
Mm.
But they're a side that I really like, mate, and think they're going to be a huge threat. But let's just take this weekend and just enjoy it because everything went our way, Tom. I know that we're not really fighting at the moment with Chelsea, but they dropped points. Tottenham lost. Liverpool and Manchester United might have won, but Manchester City, of course, dropped points as well as Newcastle. And it was
Mm.
all the pressure again, yet on Arsenal. It seems the whole season has been, what are Arsenal going to do? Everybody else is messed up. And the pressure seems even more so on us, but we keep doing it, mate. And it was a convincing performance. And in the last 15, 20 minutes, I think we probably will look back and think what the hell happened there. And I still can't really put my finger on it, Tom. So I'll be interested in what your thoughts were there. But we're top of the league. We're 7 points clear, and it's looking very, very rosy at the moment, bro.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm very lucky to be able to go and sit and chat to the players sometimes after the games, and to have that align with this season. It's
Mm,
has been a crazy experience. I think that what we have kind of hoped from this Arteta era at Arsenal is happening. And I'd say that 99% of us did hope that this would happen. There were signs that he was trying to build something. Sometimes you build something and it collapses, falls apart, and it turns to nothing. But with this Arsenal team, it's something that you always thought he's got these principles, he's got these ideas, he wants to play a certain way. He's always said that when he gets the players he wants, he'll be able to show that. And with the team that he's built, along with Edu and the club as well, and the owners who often, including from both of us, face plenty of stick at times.
mm.
They are building something, and we're seeing the benefits of that, and it's really enjoyable. The only kind of drawback from my place is I can't celebrate it in the same way because I'll be like against Brighton. I'm sitting around all the Brighton fans. The fourth goal goes in, and I'm sitting on my hands like I've got to not celebrate in front of all
Oh, I
these
couldn't do
guys.
that. That's so hard, isn't it? That is
It
so
is
hard.
hard. It is really difficult. Yeah.
I mean, what did you put it down to, Tom, in terms of, and I don't want to start it like this because I shouldn't be, but it was
Yeah.
confusing. I kind of looked at the last 20 minutes of that game and I thought, I don't think it's the subs because I rate them. I actually like Tierney. I like
Mm.
Tommy Yasu. I don't mind El Neni. I know he gets a lot of stick, but actually he's a very honest player. He's never tried to say he's a Fabregas. He's always made it clear that he can come in and do a job. And I'm not really a fan of Rob Holding, but, I didn't think it was really pinpointed at players like that. I just felt perhaps we lost a bit of momentum. And do we have to give Brighton a bit of credit? They're no they're no mugs, Brighton.
Yeah, I mean, and they were missing some key players, yesterday on Saturday. Sorry, you got Caicedo out. McAllister's only just come back today. They were without Welbeck. Webster wasn't there either, but they've got a really good team, and they just have this knack of finding great talent. I really like Mitoma. I think he's a fantastic player. He's deceptively older than I thought he was. He's 25, and I thought he was kind of in his early 20s. But I still would be interested to see how he would get on at one of the big Premier League teams if he was to be given a chance there, because I think he's so talented. You've got Trossard, of course, who's done really, really well. Their fullbacks are an interesting players. Lamptey and Estupiñán have been good this season as well. And then you've got De Zerbi, who's been fantastic since taking over from Graham Potter. They're just identification of talent both on and off the field has been very, very good. And when it did start to go a little bit wrong yesterday, I think we can all agree at 3-0 up, we thought, this is very much in the bag. You can't see us really dropping things from there. I was chatting to the other Brighton-based journalist there, and they were saying, Arsenal were the best team they've seen play there all season. And when we took off both fullbacks, which I wasn't too fussed about us doing, it is risky, and certainly we paid the price for doing that. But we had a game in 3 days' time against Newcastle now tomorrow, of course. Zinchenko's fitness has always been in question, and Tomiyasu needs minutes, to get back into the game himself. So I didn't have an issue with the subs. I would have done if we were winning by the 1 or 2 goals maybe at the time. Then I might have taken a little bit more umbrage with it, or maybe just brought off Zinchenko and brought Tierney on his own, and then brought on Tomiyasu later. But yeah, I think a lot of what we saw towards the end of the game was because of the drastic changes we made to the team. It's unsurprising that happened. You take off both of 2 key positions on the field with 2 other players that are coming in cold, that aren't up to speed immediately, with a team like Brighton who are, they don't give up. They can be 3 or 4 down and they're going to still go for you and gun to try and get back into the game. So I wasn't too concerned about the one kind of sole negative from the game, which was how the things changed after we made those changes. But I was just overall impressed with how we approached the game, how we started the game, and then started the second half, identical in how we approached that. So it's just a team full of energy and momentum right now, and it's really working in our favour.
Yeah, listen, we quick out the blocks is an understatement, mate. Saka, absolutely superb. That was an underrated goal, wasn't it? It was such a great finish from his first touch and a superb composed finish. But Thomas Partey deserves a lot of credit for that. For me, I thought the break up in play from Tariq Lamptey, who I really like, by the way. I think he's a great little right fullback. And then the first chance pass from Zinchenko through to Martinelli, and a great finish. But the player after that, Tom, that absolutely run the show for me was Martin Odegaard. Now, I've been a huge fan of him this season, and as well as others that listen to me, that I questioned whether he was the guy to score our goals and assist our goals. And this season already, he's matched what he got for the whole of last season in just 15, 16 games. To me, he's been instrumental. I actually love our midfield 3. I think the trio have been superb this season for us. But he has been, in the last 2 games, absolutely magical. Now, I know he didn't go to the World Cup, so of course he's fresher than some of the others, but he has just been superb, Tom. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on how good and how important he will be this season for Arsenal, mate.
I think that this season we can talk about individual players, and we can talk about individual managers and coaches. And I know you've asked me about one specific player, but the whole team is so important when you look at individuals, because collectively, when they come together, they're so good. And you run through the importance of, like, Odegaard was amazing. Saka was great. Martinelli was great. Nketiah was great. I'm sure we'll talk about Nketiah as well in more detail. But every part of that team, individuals to the entire side, when you look back at previous iterations of Arsenal over the last 10 to 15 years, it's been Ozil, you've had Alexis, you've had, Aubameyang coming in to replace Alexis's goals. People say that Aubameyang, dragged us to that 2020 FA Cup win by himself. There was other stuff around it, but he was a huge factor in that. Alexis, when we beat Aston Villa in the final that season was brilliant. Ozil, when he joined us in 2013 and we won the FA Cup in that season, we beat Hull in the final. Ozil was a massive part of that, but you had, other figures like Santi Cazorla, of course, who in the previous season really came to the fore. But this team, just every part of it, there isn't a weak link for me now. And, we always used to look at the team and go, well, there's a weak link there. We need to improve there. And yes, we're without our main striker right now, but Nketiah has come in and scored 2 in 2. you know, Partey, Xhaka, Odegaard has got to be the best midfield three in the league right now. I don't think there's much debate about that. I think Odegaard on his own is probably the most informed player in the Premier League right now. He's up there with his compatriot Erling Haaland, of course, for his goal scoring, but just his contributions, you know, are just, they're unrivaled right now. Yeah, and the thing is, he was challenged. There was a big question around Odegaard was, can he be a goal scorer? Can he add the goals? And, you know, I was a bit sympathetic to him because I look at him as a bit similar to the role that the last season in particular, Bernardo Silva played at City. And Bernardo Silva scored the same amount of goals as Odegaard did last season. So despite him getting a lot of focus on the goal side of things, he actually performed relatively well in comparison to another top player. I think now, obviously, that if you think about what Odegaard is, he is moving more towards that De Bruyne figure for Arsenal, where he is scoring more goals. He is being really influential rather than the supportive figure that Bernardo Silva is at City. And that's good. We want him to move in that direction towards that profile of player and be that talismanic figure for us. And not only that, but he's the captain as well, which is great. You know, I actually spoke to him after the game and asked him about the captaincy. And you know, he talked about how he speaks when he feels he needs to. And he only wants to kind of come forward with his thoughts when he feels they're needed. You've got other really big speakers in that dressing room, some on the field, some off. Rob Holding is a massive vocal part of the team, even though he's not playing. You got Granit Xhaka, of course. Ben White is vocal. Ramsdale is vocal. So, you know, there's a lot of players in that team. But yeah, I know you wanted to talk about one player in particular, but I just feel as though
I think you've answered it perfectly, mate.
It's great to be able to talk about the whole team being great. And that, again, comes back props to the people that have put it together, because it's so likable as well. It's nice to have a team that we really like individually. They're a likable group.
They are, mate. And you know what's funny, Tom? You know, I want to come on to a couple more players in a minute before we talk transfers. It's weird, isn't it? You can talk about his team for a long time at the moment. But I look at it and think, actually, in the last 2-3 windows, or whatever you want to call it, maybe seasons now, actually, there was a lot of doubt over every single player that we went for. Whenever Arteta and Edu went for a player, it was like, Ramsdale, are you mad? Tomiyasu, who the hell's that? Ben White, 50 million, absolutely howling. Gabriel, that's a lot of money for someone in France who ain't kicked a ball. I look at this now and think, yeah, do you know what? All of those have worked. Odegaard, you can add on to that. Obviously, Thomas Partey. We've looked this season at adding the quality of Jesus and Saliba coming back. Zinchenko being added to that group now as well. And I think a lot of people also doubted the fact that Saka, Smith Rowe and Martinelli were too young and that they're going to be great in a few years' time, but they're not going to be able to do it right now. It's kind of being proven wrong by everybody that had any of those doubts this season. Now, one thing that I've always said that I've been okay with is actually the players. It's always been the manager I had the doubts with, and also the ownership and the new regime. But one thing I've always been clear about is that I've actually been quite confident that what they've been doing off the pitch has been quite good. What they were doing on it, I didn't really like. But actually, when you look this season, one of the biggest things that I've seen in terms of the progression, Tom, is the fact that everything that was done off the pitch is now starting to prove why it was needed to be done, because it started to show on it. And I think that, for me, is the biggest progression. A lot of people think it's just buying Jesus. It's not. There's a lot more than that. Yeah, Jesus has been fantastic, has Saliba and Zinchenko. But somebody asked me, I think it was on AFTV, they said, where is it with you then? Because you've been doubtful of the project, doubtful of the process, doubtful of Mikel Arteta. And that was my answer. I said, everything that they've done off the pitch that I've always liked is now starting to show on it. And you've summed it up there previously. You're speaking to all of the players now. You've got an amazing position and well played to you and well deserved, mate, to be able to get close to that and be able to look at it. And you can see that everyone's together. You can see already you've named the players that are talking in the dressing room, the leaders on the group. It looks like it's all coming together. I want it to be sustainable. I want it to continue. And I'm not going to get carried away and say we're going to win the league. But right now, you can't sit there and not get excited by what you're seeing on the pitch, mate. And I do believe the manager and the project, the process, the regime, whoever you want to call it, all deserve praise for what they've done off the pitch, because it has been always, I think, the right way. And there's always been that plan. It was whether that would come into fruition, whether it would be executed, that was always in my doubt. But this season, it's really coming in, Tom. So I'm looking at that now, thinking that that's the biggest thing I've seen in terms of progress this season.
Yeah, I like what I've seen across the boards. The connection with the fans is key. You know, the relationship. You can have success, right? You can turn around, you can sack a manager, you can bring someone else in, they can do well. But, you know, during low moments, I think the difference between, you know, do you remember when with Unai Emery, there were times where we didn't have our best game, and sometimes we wouldn't turn things around, and the crowd was still quiet, even away from home. And we've got, in my opinion, the best away fans in the league. You know, even the away crowd dulled a bit with their enthusiasm, if you like. You have to repair that connection. You have to repair that relationship. And they've put such an emphasis on trying to be more communicative, you know, especially from the owner's side of things. They've tried, Josh in particular, you know, you're never going to get it from Stan. He's just not that person.
Silent Stan, mate. Silent Stan.
Exactly. You're just not going to. And to be honest, I don't really care about Stan because he owns the club, but he understands, he's got his fingers in so many pies with all these different teams. Josh, he's giving it to Josh, and he basically, Josh is the guy. Josh is the guy that's going to be the KSE figurehead for Arsenal, and I'm fine with that as long as, you know, because clearly that is working for us, and clearly Stan trusts his son. It's not just Arsenal he has. You know, he works with the Nuggets as well, I believe. I think they've got a lacrosse team that Josh is a big part of as well. You know, so he's really very much into sport and success, and he's a good speaker. Now, previously, we've always kind of looked at that and gone, is he a good speaker in the sense of, yeah, he's a good speaker, you know, you would believe anything he sort of says, or is he a good speaker and is he a genuine speaker? And, you know, the whole be excited tagline that came those years ago, we all laughed at in retrospect. I think actually, you know, he kind of did know what we had at the time and what they wanted to do. I think we actually still had Unai Emery when he said that. That was before the Pepe signing. But when we got Mikel Arteta in, you know, I think he believed that they were on the right track and they wanted to move towards something that fans could be excited about. And I think we are in a place, I mean, who isn't excited about Arsenal as an Arsenal fan right now? I'm sure there are rival fans in your listenership that aren't necessarily excited about Arsenal doing what they're doing. But that was always important, was recovering the relationship between the fan base and the players and the manager. And I mean, when we conceded against West Ham, not from like, you know, an own goal like we saw with Saliba against Leicester, and you saw the reaction of the crowd when he scored that own goal. We conceded because of a mistake from Saliba, ironically, again, with the penalty, which, you know, whether or not it was a penalty is up for debate for some. I think it was nailed on personally, but we conceded the penalty. The reaction of the fans when we conceded, we made a louder noise in that ground than the West Ham fans did celebrating. and that is critical. Like, you look at the game with Spurs, let's say compare it to Spurs in their game the other day. They go 1-0 down to Villa and there is boos ringing out everywhere because that connection's not there. They're frustrated with their ownership. They're frustrated in the situation that they're in because they don't believe they're on the right path. At Arsenal, we believe we're on this right pathway because of who's here, what players are here, the decisions that are being made. It's still not perfect. You know, there's some mistakes that have been made, and that's fair. You're never going to have perfection. But it's so exciting. I feel like I may have scooted around your question a bit, so feel free to steer me back.
No, not at all, man. Listen, you know, I think for me, what's exciting is that at the moment, whether you are a massive fan of what's happening within your football club that you support or not, I see a plan at Arsenal and I don't see many plans at the others, or I see a plan that just doesn't look like it's going to work. Example, Tottenham. I don't know what's going on there. I've no idea with that. I don't understand what's happening at Chelsea. They've just got a nutty owner now who just wants to go and splash cash with no plan. Manchester United have now stripped things back finally under Ten Hag and look like they've got more of a plan than they've ever had before. That's taken them since the Ferguson era to try and get right. Obviously, Manchester City don't need a plan because they've got it all implemented already. Liverpool look like they might need to start again in a few parts of their sort of regime, or maybe they need a bit more work done behind the scenes, but I have faith that they'll get it right because they're a well-run club. But with Arsenal, it looks at the moment that there is a plan, there is an understanding of what we're doing finally. And I think that there's always been that. There was always doubts about whether it was going to work, and it didn't look like it was going to for 3 seasons. Now, boom, it's actually been hit with a bang. But Tom, I wanted to touch on a couple of players before we do move on, because there's been a couple of things that's happened even since we've been talking that the chat have picked up on. I want to talk about Saliba and I want to talk about Eddie Nketiah very quickly with you, because Saliba doesn't look quite right in the last couple of games. And I've put it down to him not playing football, if I'm honest. He's played 40 minutes in the last 6 weeks. And to be fair, probably he looks a little bit rustier than he has done at the start. Now, I don't know if we're being harsh because we're just expecting him to be Cannavaro in every single game now. But what I do also look at is the fact that he has made a couple of mistakes that have led to goals. And I wanted to ask your reaction from that and what you believe will now happen with Saliba, because I think it's going to be interesting for me to see how he'll bounce back from those mistakes.
Yeah, I think it's a really easy answer, actually. And it's simply that he's young. You know, he's a young centre-back. And we've said this I've said it, for a long time about how that loan was necessary. that he needed to go to Marseille for that season. And I know there's a lot of people that would have rather have seen him here last season than, say, Rob Holding. But at that time, before that season started, Arteta himself said that he didn't feel Saliba was ready yet to come into the Arsenal team. And I think we've seen some mistakes this season that would certainly indicate to me that maybe more than a year ago, there might be more mistakes in his game. And I'd rather he make those mistakes at Marseille and learn from that and improve his aerial game, which he really did whilst out in France in particular, because that was kind of the weakest part of his game, really defensively, is how he was in the air. And that's improved significantly. This season, you're looking at a centre-back who is definitely ready to be starting for Arsenal, but is still 21 and is still going to make mistakes. And I think we are seeing some of those mistakes. Like Jason says in the chat there, I think it's a bit of a blip here and there, and he's going to have these little blips and he's going to have these little errors in his game. But with time and learning and coaching, he'll get better. I kind of prefer the fact that, there are still some errors whilst we can afford them to happen because we're good enough that we can avoid letting those errors really affect our results in these games at the moment. And I'm glad that they can happen because as well, I think it grounds him. I think it doesn't let his head fly away and think he's kind of this amazing centre-back, the best ever, already, and he deserves to be playing at Real Madrid or whatever for the rest of his career. And I think maybe that will help us with convincing him that he is in the right place, that he's going to get the coaching he needs to improve, and the expectation upon him is going to be still measured. For me, he is amongst Saka and Martinelli and him. I look at him as probably my priority in re-signing a contract. And that might seem mad because I love Saka and Martinelli as well. And Saka is key because he came through and he needs to stay. But I just look at Saliba, and I've used this terminology before, that I look at him as a Ronaldo, Messi centre-back equivalent of the future. Wow. I genuinely think he can get to that equivalent level as a centre-back with the ability, with his speed, with his strength, his composure, his confidence, his calmness, all of the qualities to be one of the best centre-backs ever. And, it's easy to overhype someone, and I'm probably doing that. But I just see something special there. And I don't think that's a wild thing to say about a player that we know is this good. But yeah, I think it's such a priority to keep it.
Honestly, I think it's justifiable in what you're saying. I've seen a lot of defenders, I'd like to think, in my 35 years watching football. And I've seen some shockers, mate. I've also had the privilege of seeing some very, very good ones. And I'm not just talking about Arsenal here. I'm talking about Premier League centre-backs like Kompany, like Van Dijk, like Vidic, like Ferdinand, Terry, Campbell, Adams. It goes on. And I honestly believe that we're seeing something very special here because I haven't seen a centre-half as good as him at 21. I look at all of those at 21 and think this kid's better. And that's mad. What a compliment that is for him. So I hope that it is just a blip and he can get back into it. Tom, I wanted to lastly touch on Eddie. He's a player that everyone has been talking about. Even Arsenal fans, neutral fans are not talking about, are talking about Eddie. Oh my God, this is where Arsenal goes wrong. This is what happens now. Jesus is out. It's weird saying we don't miss Jesus because we do, because he's Jesus and he's great. But I kind of get what people mean when they say that, because actually in the last two games, I've been very impressed with Eddie Nketiah. I've been impressed with his work rate, and I think off the ball, he's definitely got stronger and better. I've said that before. He's developed in his game a lot, but I've seen him doing what Lacazette couldn't do last season, and that's dropping that tip of the diamond a lot deeper, get himself involved. But the energy intensity is just there in terms of what Lacazette was trying to do, which, to be fair, just isn't his game. So for me, I think he deserves a lot of credit, Tom, Eddie Nketiah.
Yeah, I think your point on Lacazette's perfect. He's not necessarily done that as much for Lyon. He's been the tip of the spear and he's got 10 goals, which probably tells you, that's what you should really do with Lacazette. But that's not what Arteta wants from a striker. He wants his striker to be collaborative. He wants them to drop him with energy and press and harry at the same time. Jesus does that perfectly. And the question was always whether or not Nketiah would also be able to do that. Everyone had doubts. I had doubts. You had doubts. We all had doubts about whether or not. And we look back with hindsight, and there's part of me going, why am I so doubtful? Because at the end of last season, when he came in, he did well. He scored goals. He won us games. The Chelsea game in particular comes to mind immediately. So why was I so doubtful? Well, it's probably because of how good Gabriel Jesus has been and how much of an impact he's made. That probably is the main reason. But there's also the fact that Eddie Nketiah has been here for a long, long time. And so he's kind of a known factor. And so everyone kind of thinks they know what they're getting with Eddie Nketiah. And in reality, maybe we don't know fully what you get with Eddie Nketiah until you keep giving him those chances. Off the bench, he can give you a bit of an impact. But starting games consistently, we only really saw that at the end of last season. And I don't think anyone could describe that other than a success for him individually. He was a success in the end of last season. So I think we should be emboldened by this 2 goals in 2 games. We should be emboldened not just behind the goals, but behind the performances overall as well. And he's also got so much support from the players around him. You know, they really back him. And again, it comes back to that team unity and how much they want to win and how much they want to succeed together. And they're all backing him. None of them are going, oh, no, you know, Jesus is a huge loss. You know, we're going to have to really step things up. They're not saying that. They're saying, you know, yeah, Jesus is a big loss, but we've got this kid, Eddie, and he's brilliant and we back him and we know that he's good enough. So that again, that team kind of dynamic is good. You know, I've seen a comment in the chat box. I think there are some fans out there that are never going to accept that they maybe can be wrong about Eddie, and that's fine. You know, pride sometimes comes before evidence, I guess. But I just look at what he's doing, and you can't ignore it. He's tenacious. He's determined. You know, he fights for every inch of blade of grass that he can, and he wants to prove people wrong. And I don't blame him for doing that when he scored against West Ham. Fair play to the kid. You know, screw the haters at the end of the day and score the goals, because if it helps us, I'm happy as anything.
Well, listen, he's doing exactly what he needs to do to shut the doubters up. And, you know, I don't mind admitting that I was doubtful that he could come in and do a job, because he has done it before. But when I have seen him in some games, he's been really quiet and hasn't done much. So, of course, there's doubt there. I've really been impressed with him in the last 2 games. I thought he took his goal fantastically well against West Ham, and I thought he was a nuisance all game against Brighton. So, for me, long may it continue. There's going to be some in there that think that if we start bigging up Eddie, then we won't ever sign anybody to replace him, and Eddie will be our next number 9. That is just not the case. You know, we need a squad, and Eddie is a part of that. And there's no reason why Eddie can't be a part of that. I've always liked Eddie in terms of him as a person. I've sometimes questioned him whether he's good enough as a player, but I've kind of accepted that he's not going to get me 30 goals a season. So I'm not disappointed when he doesn't. For me, it's kind of like when we had Carl Jenkinson as a bit. I knew he was never going to be Lee Dixon, but I loved him because he was a massive gooner. He'd come through the same Arsenal team celebrating what I was celebrating. You know, he was in his bedroom with all the wallpaper and the duvet that I was when I was 8 or 9 as well. You know, I loved that. And I kind of see that with Eddie. He's come through. We want him to do well. And to be fair to him, at the moment, he's doing well. So I'm going to big him up and say fair play to him. And, you know, I don't mind sitting there and having this pride that some people don't. They seem to just never want to be wrong in this world. Surely that's part of it, isn't it? That's why we do this. I want to be wrong all the time so that we can say, crikey, now I'm happy. I was really unhappy. Now I'm happy. That's kind of what it's about. But some people can't do that, mate. It's weird. Tom, let's get on to what we want to talk about, which is, of course, this guy, Harvey, has put it up apparently in the last few minutes. Fabrizio Romano says that Arsenal have improved their proposal to sign Mudryk, and it's confirmed as the talks are on after their 40 plus £20 million that was rejected. Apparently, it's reported that Chelsea are also interested in case it does collapse, but Arsenal remain the priority. I don't want to ask you what you think about the player because I already know that you're a fan and that we've spoken about this before, and it seems that it's been around for a while. But also, Ben Jacobs has come out and said that we have now made a second bid, and it's looking like the package remains under the €70 million mark with £55 million up front. Tom, I'm not even going to pose a question, mate. Talk to me. What's your thoughts on this one? Is it going to happen, do you think?
Yeah, just to clarify what Harvey said there, we haven't. I don't know if we've offered Shakhtar 55 million up front, but Ben said that that's what Shakhtar want in terms of up front. So they want the 55 million euros up front. You know, I know Ben; he's very well connected. No reason to doubt that information at all. He actually spoke to Mudryk a few months ago. Did an interview with him, and he just, you know, he could not have been more praising of Arsenal, you know, more open. And we know in these last few months how much he clearly wants to move. I mean, I've never seen a player like could be tweeting or Instagram storying that he's watching
proper twerking,
the game.
isn't
he? Yeah, he is. You know, and there's some people like my good friend Drew who comes on the channel. We did a podcast yesterday with him. Who's not a fan of that at all. Like, he really doesn't like that. He says that it's, you know, and to be fair to Drew, I know a lot of people disagree with his point of view, but he also pointed this out about Aubameyang when we signed him from Dortmund. He was one of the first people that turned to me and said, you know, the way he left Dortmund wasn't okay, and it's going to happen again. And lo and behold, you know, a couple of years later, we had issues with Aubameyang. So he was spot on about that. So if he's a bit concerned about Mudryk, I think, you know, I say fair enough, Drew. You've got a right to be. I don't mind it. I think it's quite funny. I quite like it. I think it's a lot less kind of lighthearted than the whole Aubameyang situation. But I do see the point of view. If it was another way around, if Martinelli, for instance, was doing that and, you know, twerking for another club, I'd probably be a bit annoyed. And I'm sure there's Shakhtar fans that aren't particularly happy about him doing it either.
Of course.
But on the other side of the coin, I don't believe that Arteta would move for anybody that felt they weren't in a space of mind or didn't have the right mentality or commitment or attitude to join the club. So I've got no issue with that at all in that sense, because I trust the recruitment team. I trust what they're doing because they've given me no real reason not to. I am very hopeful that we can get this done. I said this to you earlier when we did these shows, a month or two ago at the start of December, even before that in November, I've been fairly confident. I thought it was 50-50, and then it kind of leans towards us actually showing we might be willing to spend this big money on him. It was always going to be about whether Shakhtar would come down from that silly 100 million valuation, which isn't the case. I think the Gakpo deal has really helped us because I think it's given some context to how much players should be moving for in this window and depending on their value. So that's good. I also don't think that Arsenal would put in a second bid without having done the due diligence in terms of talking with the club about, because the first bid is good to do because it gives you kind of a foundation to work from if it's going to be rejected. Let's be real, 60 million euros for a player like Mudryk, who, let's say 8 months ago, wasn't really known too well. It's not a muggy offer. They can reject it, sure, because they want more, but it's a respectful offer without a shadow of a doubt. So with this second bid going in, I'd be very confident in thinking that the club would have been communicating, as we know, because Shakhtar produced that statement where they were like, I think it was the Vice President Nicolini that said, I've got a meeting with Arsenal in 5 minutes, to talk about it. And they've been talking for some time. So why would they put in a bid in without it being informed? Do you know what I mean? So I'm confident about that. The key, whilst I have no contacts or like on the Shakhtar, the Mudryk side of things, the only thing that I know, and I've been saying on my side of things, is the club don't want Mudryk to become the record signing. They do not want to pay more than they paid for Pepe. They don't want that tag alongside Mudryk. I think that's where they might draw the line. If they're desperate, they might push it and go over, but I doubt it. And from the sounds of what Ben's saying, under 70 million euros obviously puts us well inside that bracket. So that certainly kind of, again, vindicates that point of view that I've been told, that they really don't want Mudryk to become a record signing. They don't want that tag associated with him. They want him to be able to come in, not always have that pressure of having that record label associated with him. He can come in and do his business. But yeah, I'm getting to dangerous, as I've been saying, Zoboslai levels of obsession with this guy. He's a special player.
Yeah, he looks a talent, and it's hard sometimes to go by what you see on clips and YouTube and stuff like that. But the good thing about this guy is we've seen him all in the Champions League, how good he's been and how much, people will say, I look good in the Champions League, but they might not have watched the game, or they might have seen his goal or his setup or assist. But I always look at when I love BT Sport on the Champions League with you, the goals, where they all go in.
The goal show with James Richardson.
The goal show, absolutely love that.
Yeah.
Such a good film. Always watch that in the group stages of the Champions League.
Do you know why it's so good? It's because they don't get former players on. They get journalists on. And I know I'm biased, right? But I love the fact that they get the journalists on, because there's almost something like about when they get former players on, and there are some really good former player pundits, don't get me wrong. But I like the fact that they get people that just dedicate their lives to learning, researching, talking about football on for that show. And it's a bit of a niche in that sense.
Yeah, 100. And I watch it, and I watch this guy. And before we were linked with him, I remember thinking, who's that blonde lad? He looks good. And then all of a sudden it come up my drive. Oh, surprise, here we go. We're now linked with someone who played one good game. And then it turned into 2 good games, 3 good games, 4 good games. And I think, oh, okay, maybe we're serious about this. And since then, it's never gone away. I think it will happen. But I wanted to ask you quickly before we move on to the next guy that we're linked with, what he's going to bring to Arsenal and what you think Arteta's going to use, or how he's going to utilise him. Because there's Smith Rowe to come back. You've already got Martinelli there. There's talk of front 3 switch arounds. Number 9 being potentially Martinelli, and if it does need to be at that stage. I mean, it's going to be great strength in depth, Tom, but how do we use this guy?
So in these 6 months, which is what people care about more than anything, is how he's going to impact things immediately. I don't think he's going to be a starter, even though he's going to cost a significant amount of money. I think it'd only be a starter as if, Martinelli gets injured or an Nketiah gets injured and Martinelli has to be moved into the middle. That's where he's going to start in these 6 months. And that's fine because he's coming from another league. He needs that transition time. He needs to do what he does. But it's still important that he has an impact in these 6 months, and he can, because what I would recommend people doing is, if you haven't seen his first official debut for Ukraine. He played a couple of unofficial games when Ukraine were playing those strange kind of unofficial friendlies. I think they played Gladbach in one of them, that kind of unofficial level of friendly. His official debut came against Scotland in the semi-final playoff round for the World Cup. They were winning 2-1 when he came on with 23 minutes left. And so Scotland were kind of, really trying to push, and a little bit like Brighton in the game on Saturday, trying to push, and they left a lot of space in behind, which is where Martinelli's goal came from. In the positions that we're going to be in this season, where we're winning a goal by 1 or just 2, or the other team are really starting to push a bit, being able to bring a player like Mudryk off the bench is going to be so important for us in killing off games and just putting a nail in the coffin for games. We don't really have that. We had Marquinhos and Fabio Vieira on the bench against Brighton because Nelson's injured and because Smith Rowe isn't back yet. We haven't really got a killer on that bench right now. You've got Fabio Vieira. I like a lot of what he does, but he's not a killer from the bench. I think we need that right now. And Mudryk in these 6 months is going to be that. And then in the long term, he can absolutely develop into one of the best wide players potentially that we could have. So that's what's important. But yeah, go watch the game against Scotland would be my recommendation. In those 23 minutes, he shows you why Arsenal are so interested in him.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Croydon De Bruyne, bless him, is starting to turn into the A&E De Bruyne. I said the other day, he seems to be in, it's a nightmare. Absolutely love him. But it's mad to see that, we're just not hearing about when he's coming back. Now, I know he's in training and hope we see him in the next few games on the bench. But it's going to be interesting because if he is going to have injury problems, Mudryk is going to be coming in and providing competition, Tom. So we need some firepower, and he would definitely, add that, in my opinion. I think from what I see, it's been fantastic. Tom, I want to ask you, in all seriousness, about the realistic chances of this happening. I've got to bring this up because Jason says, do you think Atletico Madrid is trying to rip off Arsenal with the Felix loan deal? Now, I haven't heard anything, mate. I don't know what it is. Somebody in the chat said it's £15 million loan deal.
And a ridiculous amount of wage
deal. Okay. So let me ask you, what's going on with João Felix, Tom?
Marca reported it, and then David Ornstein reported it this morning that the total package Atleti are asking for is 21 million euros. That's wages and loan fee for that period, which is frankly ridiculous. The concept of signing someone for less than 6 months for how many games? Probably, well, if we play a few in January, because I think if it is going to happen, it'll probably happen towards the end of the January window. So you got 3 Premier League games on top of what we already played, so that's 19. So you have 19 left. So for 19 games, you're going to pay 21 million euros for one player. That's more than €1 million a game in the Premier League. That's ridiculous. That's just silly in terms of the money that they're after. A player that you don't even own when the loan's finished. So Arsenal want him. Arsenal are very interested in signing him on loan. I think it's a very, very good option for a temporary deal because there's ignore the money for a minute, but there's no risk in terms of it doesn't necessarily work out because he's not our player. You're committing a certain financial package to that player, and he can play as a centre forward. He can play in a wide area. He can play off the striker. You can bring him on when you want to play with 2 forwards. He's a very good option. And I think in the right team, he would absolutely explode. I don't think Atleti is or has been the right team under Simeone for him. It's just not the right style for him. And that's why I think he does better when he plays in the Portuguese team when Ronaldo's not there. I think that works a lot better. So I think in this Arsenal team, he absolutely could thrive, but we have to come down on that. 21 million euros is silly. To do that would be a joke. And I'm all for spending upwards of 60, 70 million euros on Mudryk because I think that's a good investment. But 21 million euros is not a good investment for a João Felix loan deal for 6 months. It would just be crazy to do that.
And Tom, it's mad because in some ways I'm agreeing to think that sounds a crazy deal. But I want to bring up a comment that I think is something I've mentioned before. There's a lot of Arsenal accountants out there, and I don't quite know why. And Maximus, big up yourself, mate. Thanks for the comment. It says, why are fans so obsessed with money? We need to win the league. I don't care as long as he'll strengthen our position to win. And do you think Chelsea fans cared when they're winning Champions League and Premier Leagues? And Tom, before you come back in on that point, I do think it's important to get a balance of this might be a crazy deal, but in May, if it wins us the league, are we going to sit there and say, what a crazy deal? And I know it's easier to say that because we've won the league, but do you get my point? Like, maybe it is what we need to win us the league. And then would 21 million euros be a crazy amount if it won us the league? I think that's what Maximus is getting at.
No, and I understand that point of view. And, if we won the league, the money would, the money for winning the league is a hell of a lot. Getting into the Champions League is a hell of a lot. And you'd say at this point, it's more of a when Arsenal qualify for the Champions League rather than if. And I think that's probably why Arsenal are willing to spend more. My issue with that is that when you're already talking about spending near 70, well, probably 55 up front, it seems, on Mudryk, I personally think we also need to invest in a midfielder in this window as well. I'm not sure how realistic that'll be. Maybe we'll talk about Tielemans in a bit. But I just think you still need to be clever. I think you need to be savvy with how you spend. And also you need to not allow clubs to take you for a ride and get a reputation, because that makes future investments harder. It makes you look weak in a market as well. It makes clubs think that you will pay well over the odds to get a player in, and Chelsea and Man City have had to suffer that, and in fact have made the market worse because of the investments that they've done themselves. And so when we try and go for a Bellingham or a Rice or someone, they'll go, hold on a second, you were willing to spend 21 million euros on this guy for 6 months, and you think we're going to let you buy Declan Rice or Jude Bellingham permanently for less than this stupid transfer fee? I'm all for, I desperately want us to win the league. I don't know how much of an impact Joao Felix in 6 months will actually make on this current team, because they're doing so well. Joao Felix doesn't start for us right now, So would I compromise that position for a player that's not necessarily going to change things dramatically for us? I don't think I would, but I do think that we need to bring in that forward. I would bring in Joao Felix on a significantly more sensible situation. It just isn't. It's not worth compromise. It's not worth. So what I'm looking for, it is compromising. It would compromise, I think, our position in a market for better deals. And I feel like the same people that are saying do it anyway, we need to win the league, would be the same people then moaning, why aren't we stumping up 120 million for Bellingham? Or why aren't we stumping up £300,000 per week for Bellingham? Or why aren't we spending 100 million pound on Rice or 70 million on Milinkovic-Savic? And the answer will be, we might have done, but actually that loan deal, and it sounds silly to say it on itself, but that extra investment, that over-the-top move that we did in January that didn't pay off, has cost us this move. So, and I don't think it's a necessity either. Mudryk, I think, is a game changer for us, both for this 6 months and potentially in the future. So get it done. Joao Felix is not a game changer. I think he's an addition that adds depth and quality, but he's not a game changer for us. So why compromise us in the future for a deal that doesn't necessarily bring you guarantees now?
Do you think, Tom, as well, just lastly on this point, that there could be a Martin Odegaard situation done if we were to find an interest where we go loan and then obligation to buy? And in that case, do you think that there is a player that we could be interested in that we see as a future player at Arsenal? Or is this just someone to come in now just to try and win us something this season and just this season only, and then he goes back to Atletico Madrid? Like, what one is it, do you think?
Yeah, look, I think that there's a lot of similarities between the Joao Felix and the Odegaard thing, because Odegaard, like Joao Felix, ironically another Madrid team, came in with a lot of promise, a lot of hype, hasn't necessarily delivered that at that club. But again, it was always about the system. Martin Odegaard doesn't really fit, and didn't when he was there. He was more of a 10 at Real Sociedad when he was on loan, because that was his more natural position. Didn't really fit into the Kroos, Modric centre midfielder roles. Ironically, since Arteta's kind of changed him, he kind of does fit into that quite nicely now, but didn't then. So that's why he wasn't really playing. Comes to Arsenal, finds a system that fits, finds a manager that's willing to coach him and improve him, and has, and then sees that it's the right place and right environment for him. Joao Felix, again, is a bit of a sleeping giant from a player perspective. I think certainly could be a cold spring that could improve dramatically under the right coach, the right club. If we're that, we'll have to wait and see if we are that, and fingers crossed that we are. But the problem with, and the difference I think between this and the Joao Felix one, is ultimately that Atleti will want, more than 2.5 times what we paid for Martin Odegaard, which was about 40 million euros. So you're looking at upwards of 100 million euros to sign Joao Felix. And I just don't think that is going to happen. I just don't see that permanent deal happening.
I tend to agree. I think Manchester United have got a better chance of signing than Arsenal because they just seem to be ones that will just smash cash and just go on, then we'll give you 500k a week and £21 million loan deal. That's the sort of thing Manchester United have done with crazy wages and crazy fees they pay for players. I actually quite like him. I like the player. I think he'd be a good player at 23 years old. I think he scored 30 goals in 100 games or something like that for Atletico. It's about one every 3 or 4 games that he scored, and he scores all sorts of goals, but he is kind of in and around the box, most of them. He's never scores any screamers from outside. He's more of a kind of nuisance in the box type player. And I quite like him. It hasn't really worked out. Apparently, Simeone's fallen out with him. And he would be a good signing for me. But I think if we was to get Felix and Mudryk, that is some serious firepower from the bench then.
Yeah.
Like serious firepower from the bench. So let's see what happens. Tom, I wanted to lastly talk about players in midfield. Jason said this earlier, and I thought it was key. He says, afternoon, Dan and Tom, quick question. Do we need cover for Partey this transfer window, or can we wait until the summer? I wanted to ask you about this, mate, because it seems here, and Harvey says it here, that why do we think that Danilo interest went silent? Is it because El Neni's back, or that they hesitate about his quality? I wanted to get your thoughts on the DM position, mate, because Tielemans is linked. He's not a defensive midfielder. I know he can play as a kind of centre midfielder that could probably do some defensive qualities, but he's not an anchor in midfield and never really has been, from what I can tell. So what's your thoughts about the midfield this summer? This January, should I say? Do you think that we're going to get somebody in?
I'm much less confident now because of the Jesus situation that has impacted things. I'm actually quite surprised how much it has changed from Arsenal. If you'd have, when we were talking, I think about a month ago, I didn't think it would change things as dramatically as it has. And they have seemingly shifted far more focus from the midfield now to the forward line. I don't think that's because El Neni's come back, because they always knew he was coming back. So that's not that hasn't changed things. And I agree with the point. Do we need cover for Partey? No, we need competition for Partey. I think that's the important difference between the terms.
We've already got cover for Partey, haven't we?
Exactly. Danilo, while I said to you, in these 6 months, this is what Mudryk can do. In these 6 months, Danilo is not going to give you more at 6 than El Neni does. If we were playing Manchester City next week and I had a choice and Partey wasn't available and I could choose to play El Neni or Danilo, I'm choosing El Neni all day long, and that's just the truth of it, because Danilo is still a raw player that makes mistakes. He's too progressive. We always moan a bit at El Neni for being too safe. But, I'd rather have someone that's too safe right now than someone that is making mistakes, passing the ball forwards inaccurately, creating turnovers, losing possession against a side like City. You're going to get punished, And you can gradually improve those players and coach those players. But in these 6 months in particular, it's not sensible to bring in a player for that kind of position. It's just not what we're really after and what we need right now. Can you find a player that's as good as Partey? I think the players that are out there that you can get to do that are probably going to be available in the summer. And we talk about Declan Rice. We talk about Ruben Neves potentially as another one. And even then, I'm not sure Neves is on the level. He's not on the level of Partey. Whether he could be in 3 or 4 years, maybe. But it's near impossible. So the next best option is can you find someone that can give you a competitive bit of quality now that can develop into someone as good as Partey in the near future? Maybe. Sambi Lokonga, I don't think is that guy. I don't even think 6 is his best position, to be honest.
No.
And I don't think you're going to get that. So the midfield position is the biggest problem this January for us, because whilst we need it, the options is just not there. I mean, Tope said Caicedo. Caicedo is not a 6. Caicedo is someone I look at playing with Partey, not instead of Partey. He could absolutely, like Lokonga has covered, like that, could cover there, but you're not going to get the same level of output because that's not his best role. So it's very difficult to find a player that's going to give you competition to Partey in January.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I would look at somebody like Ibrahim Sangare as an option ahead of somebody like Danilo. That for me would be someone that I would look at and say, do you know what? I really liked him when he was at Toulouse. I think he's done a good job at PSV. He certainly played well when we played them. He's probably the only one who did at the Emirates actually look quite good. And then obviously at PSV, he was really good. I'm a big fan.
PSV was great,
Brilliant. So for me, I think that would be much better and would make more sense than Tielemans or Danilo, to be fair. I like Tielemans, Tom. I do. I really do. I know he's not been great at Leicester in the last couple of games. I think his head's going a bit, and who has been good for Leicester other than Maddison really this season.
Yeah.
So I think when you look at it, it would be a strange one now because Leicester probably just think, do you know what? We don't need the 20 million that Arsenal could offer. Let's just keep him till the season. I'll be surprised if he goes. But I do sit there and think that midfield is an option that is an area, that we're really quite weak in. So firepower is needed, of course, but I honestly believe that if Partey gets injured, we are really struggling there. And I don't know that El Neni and Lokonga between them can do the job that's required. Now, I hope I'm wrong, because I like El Neni. I actually do like El Neni. But I think that probably somebody would be needed to come in. I'm with you on Danilo. I don't know enough about him, but I certainly would be choosing El Neni ahead of him because he's already part of it. He's known it. He knows what he's doing. Yeah. Danilo would need to start from scratch. So it's a really tough position. And Milinkovic-Savic, I don't even know. Is he a 6? Isn't he more of an 8 as well? I don't really know.
He is more of an 8 and more forward thinking. There is scope for him maybe to he's so versatile that maybe he could, like Partey. I mean, Partey was slightly ahead of this 6 role when he was at Atleti and has gradually become more specialised in this role at Arsenal. So I think the same kind of way there, he might be able to specialise, but he's at the moment more offensive. And you're not going to get him in January, I don't think.
Yeah, fair play, man. Just before we wrap up, mate, this is a player I always really liked till he went to Barcelona. What's going on with Kessie's situation at the moment? Do you know?
No, I really don't. I'm, my kind of watching of Spanish football's really declined since working more specifically on Arsenal. And the Spanish league's not been very good recently. That as well.
Agreed.
But I have found it odd that he's played just 212 minutes of La Liga football this season. I know he's had a couple of injuries, but he's been on the bench. He's only started 3 games in La Liga this season. So. Yeah, I don't really know. He did really well.
Maybe Busquets is still doing it.
Of course, that is a big factor. And Busquets is trusted. Again, I haven't seen loads of Nketiah, so maybe people have seen more in the chat box to be able to tell me if he is more of an out-and-out 6. But I did see him being very progressive for Milan. So whether or not he's going to do the job that that Partey's been doing, I don't know, because I couldn't comment because I don't really know enough to say that Nketiah is what Partey is right now. So, yeah.
Fair play, man. I just thought I'd mention it as I saw it in the chat. Tom, to close, mate, enough on transfers. We can rumour it, mate. We can talk about Tielemans all day long, and he still might not come. Likewise, Mudryk, and of course, Felix. But let's concentrate on where we're at the moment. We've got some mental games coming up, man. Like, literally really excited about this, but at the same time, nervous. We've obviously got Newcastle tomorrow night. We've got Tottenham away, and we've got Manchester United. And in between that, we've got Oxford in the FA Cup. Looking solely on the Premier League, what's your thoughts of these 3? Because a lot of people are saying that the Emirates will be fine and Tottenham are rubbish, so it's 9 points and we're all good. I don't think it's quite as easy as that, but I wanted to get your points on these 3 fixtures and what your prediction is for points-wise out of the 9 that is available to us, mate.
Yeah, whilst I'm maybe not as cavalier as those kind of views, I absolutely think we should win all 3. We should absolutely win them, and we are better than all 3 of them, especially with the Newcastle and United games being at home. The expectation would be 3 points in each, and Spurs are frankly dire, and no pun intended, but they are dire at the moment. So we should be getting a win, but our record there is awful. So that's going to be a challenge to overcome. Winning at Spurs in the league, we've not done since Thomas Rosicky scored that goal back in 2014, I think.
14, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, being able to get 9 points. If you offered me 7 now, I think I'd probably take that.
I would as well.
Yeah. With the draw being maybe probably against United. I think it's important that we beat Newcastle. I think it's really important we beat them. Because they need a little bit of a reality check. They are a good team, but I think they need a reality check. And I think maybe they'll get that tomorrow. I think that, we're pretty much at full strength. They've got question marks over St. Maximan. They've got question marks over Wilson. I know they've been on the bench in the last couple of games, but still there'll be question marks about them. Bruno Guimaraes is fantastic. I'm still so gutted we never got him. We should have done. That's saying that, he probably doesn't still start over Xhaka for us right now, who again has been amazing. So yeah, I'm nervous as I'm going into every game. I was nervous at the Amex, because Brighton are a good side, but we got the job done. if we take our chances, I think we'll be fine. But Newcastle defensively have been excellent this season, so getting goals against them could be tough. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to the games. And we've got a game against Oxford in between them as well, which is a really strange one because how you rotate this team and who on earth plays striker instead of Nketiah if you're going to rotate, I don't know. It's, very, very, very tricky to see what we're going to do.
Well, I think we're going to have to rotate against Oxford. I don't expect to see kids out, but I do expect to see our B team against them, and we should have enough to beat them, to be fair. But should and could is obviously a
Trippier missing. I completely missed that. Yeah, I've just checked it. That's true.
It's true. Yeah. Wow. Okay, so they're going to have their other right back. Is it Kaif or whatever his name is at right back? I can't remember his name.
What's his name? Is it Kraft?
Kraft. Well done. Well done. He's going to play, I imagine, unless they completely.
By the way, he's been unbelievable. Like Trippier has been unreal. Like, you look at the chance creation numbers for him; they're insane. Like, so Agreed. That is huge out for them.
Yeah, I can't believe that I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. I missed
Caicedo was as well. I didn't even realize Caicedo was missing until a few days before we played Brighton. So
mate, it's the festive period, mate. It's crazy. They come so thick and fast, man. It's absolutely.
Is Kraft missing as well? Apparently, someone said.
Who's going to play there?
Be at right back? Maybe they'll play Botman at right back potentially.
They might have to do something like that, mightn't they? Or maybe Lascelles will come in and play there or something like that. I don't know, but it'll be interesting.
We'll look at that
Tom, listen, you're a ledge, man. I always appreciate your views, and coming on here is an absolute pleasure. And make sure you go and do me a favor. After you've smashed like and subscribe on this, go over to the Gooner Talk TV. Get Tom well over 40k now in terms of subs, and his content's unreal. You'll see him every morning at 8 o'clock talking all things Arsenal in terms of news and transfers. And if you haven't done so already, go and check his shout out from last night, which of course had Sophie from Harvey Squad, Mike from the Gooner Talk, and of course Drew as well. So make sure you do that, please, guys. Absolute pleasure, Tom. What else you got coming up, bruv?
Probably going to try and dab my hand into Israel Felix breakdown at some point because it seems that we're very interested in him. And fingers crossed, I'll be bringing on a reaction about the Newcastle game if we can get that, or not if we can. I will, no matter what happens, I'll be bringing a reaction. But yeah, and then just the usual 8 a.m.s every day, Transfer Central, talking about what's going on in the world of Arsenal. So tomorrow's show will be very much heavily focused on this improved bids, supposedly, that we've made for Mudryk. So yeah, that'll be interesting.
Yeah, man, every day you'll be new news. This is going to be a good time to join the Gooner Talk TV if you haven't done so already, because every day Tom will be on there every morning talking about Arsenal, and there's going to be mad rumours. So make sure you do that, people. Please make sure you stay and join our community. I'm on my way to 7K, people, so please make sure you can help me to get there. Smash a like and subscribe on the channel. There's a lot of content coming up over the coming days, so please make sure you stay tuned. Please join us tonight on Lee Judges TV. Myself and Lee will be with Pete, who's obviously a part of this channel, from Newcastle, talking about the preview tomorrow night, and then we'll probably do a breakdown after that as well. So make sure you do all of those things, people. Take care. We'll see you next time, and as always, up the Arsenal.